So our theme verse tonight up here on the screen is Romans chapter 1, verse 20, where Paul, talking about that the gospel is the power of God to salvation to both Jew and Gentile, Jew and Greek, he points out that the problem that we need salvation from is, of course, our sin. Verse 18, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men. In the rest of chapter 1, he's going to talk about the unrighteousness of the Gentiles. In chapter 2, he's going to talk about the unrighteousness of the Jews. But the Gentiles might have had an excuse, they might think. They might have said, we didn't know. We didn't have Moses, we didn't have the prophets, we didn't have the scriptures. And Paul says right here in this verse that they don't have an excuse. Why? Look at it with me. He says, since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what is made. And then he says, so they are without excuse. That meant that a Gentile who had never seen or heard read Genesis, and in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, who had never heard the prophecies of Isaiah, who had never heard of the Ten Commandments, should have been able to look at creation and know there was a creator. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight, because as we're studying apologetics, last night we looked at a defensive apologetic. As we're looking at evidences tonight, we're going to be looking at a positive thing. In other words, something to present to people who don't believe in God. If you have somebody that doesn't believe in God, you're going to have a hard time convincing them that this is the Word of God if they don't believe there is a God. And so if your friend doesn't believe there is a God, start with getting them to see the evidence for the Creator, and then move on to show what you believe is the message from the Creator. But if he doesn't believe there's a God to give a message, he's not going to think it's God's message. So this is what we're talking about tonight, using nature to talk to our friends and unbelievers to help them stop and think about the fact that we are created by a creator. Since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what is made. I want you to notice here the irony. His invisible attributes can be seen. So you're able to see what's not seen. Let's look at that. So, let me get my clicker here ready. There we go. All right, what do you see in this next picture? I think everybody in the audience is thinking that is a bird's nest that's been made by a bird and bird eggs laid by a bird. How many of you see the bird? Nobody sees a bird there. But how do you know a bird has been there? Because you see what the bird made. The bird is invisible in this picture. But by looking at what the bird did, you can clearly see the bird was there. And we're going to be looking at a verse in Job about bird nests, and we're going to use bird nests as one of our prime examples tonight. It's something very, very similar. It's simple. There's a lot of things that we could use in nature. And if we have time, I'm going to show you a really cool insect and a really cool fish and something really interesting about your own person, if we have time to that. But we're going to spend a little while about bird nests, and let me tell you one reason why. Besides it's mentioned in the book of Job, it's a problem for evolutionists. And I think there's a lot of value in focusing on the things that your neighbors can see for themselves. There are powerful arguments that can be made about DNA and what goes on inside the cell and stuff like that. And those are really good arguments and powerful. But let me tell you where they can come up short sometimes. I'm not a biologist. Your friend is probably not a biologist. And when we're talking about things that we can't see, we still can't see that. we're describing things in our book, and like used to, like when Mike Morrow was young, and I would talk about evolution, sometimes I'd use these numbers. The chances of this happening was X out of so many. But a person can't necessarily see that right there. Who made up that number? Which scientist said it? Might a different scientist say something else? And so I like to use things that are really simple and obvious that everybody can see. A scientist can see it, and a mechanic can see it. You know, an older person can see it, and a younger person can see it. And so that's why we're going to use some just real basic things, and let's go ahead and get started on this idea. First, where did you come from? And I don't mean just you came from your mom and dad, but where then did your mom and dad come from? Where did human beings come from? Did we come from an everlasting God who created the heavens and the earth and plants and animals and humans, and that eventually led to you? Or was there a big bang that after billions of years produced in a solar system here an earth, and then eventually a cell began living and eventually evolved into you? And what went bang? Who knows? Now, did any of us on earth today, from you and I to your atheist friends to the scientists, did any of us see this happen? No. Did any of us see this happen? No. So both views involve believing in something we did not see happen, and we don't see happening. Neither of those are happening today in front of our eyes. We're just here. But something remarkable and powerful and unusual happened because we're here. So something exciting and unusual happened. Something that's not happening here and now. So to see what that was, we're going to look at the here and now. Because what did Paul say in Romans? By looking at creation, we can see God's powers. So like jurors in a murder trial, if you're put on a jury, do you get to go back in time and watch the murder to see who did it? No, you don't. But do you get presented evidence that remains? Yeah. Like they say, well, here's the text he sent. I'm going to kill you. Okay, that's kind of a big piece of evidence. You know, here's the bullet casing, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to look at what's here now. Now, when people look at the evidence, some people believe in God. Some people take an agnostic position. Some people say, I don't believe in God. People can have different views, and jurors in a murder trial. Somebody says, I think he's guilty. Somebody says, I think he's not. Somebody else says, I'm not sure. But you need to look at the evidence to make your decision. 1 Peter 3:15, be always ready to give answer to every man that asks you a reason concerning the hope that lies within you. Now, God has revealed himself in two ways. There is his specific revelation through the word, and that's where we see God's will and what he tells us to do, and his commands, and his plan of salvation, and his sending his son and the resurrection. But there's also the general revelation of God's power in nature. Now, that you can't look at nature and know that you should take the Lord's Supper. You can't look at nature and know that Jesus was the Messiah. But Psalm 19 says, the heavens declare the glory of God, the firmament shows his handiwork. It says that God has displayed his splendor above the heavens, Psalm 8. Psalm 139, I praise you for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. So by looking at this creation, we can see God's power. And when we're talking to an unbeliever, that's a good place to start, by looking at the evidence here now. I want to mention very briefly three simple facts. Number one, nothing comes from nothing. Number two, life comes from life. Number three, intentional design comes from an intentional designer. Those are not rocket science, but they're fundamental facts. There's a lot of things that you can talk about on a sophisticated level with a sophisticated friend that knows a lot about something, but this is something everybody should be able to understand. So if you're talking to a guy at the gas station or your neighbor across the fence, he should be able to realize nothing comes from nothing. To be able to notice, oh yeah, life comes from life. And intentional design comes from an intentional designer. By the way, if you put those together, if nothing comes from nothing, then there was always something. If life comes from life and there's life now, then there needed to be something alive. And if intentional design comes from an intentional designer, then that source of life was a designing thing, and you start to get a definition of our creator. Now, some scientists, though, they say, no, we came from nothing. So this is Science Questions. This is from a British site that says, that's a good question. Where did we come from? Well, strangely enough, the answer is nothing. The Big Bang sprang out of nothing. Stephen Hawking said, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. I want you to imagine nothing, okay? So take away Alabama, take away the United States, take away the Earth, take away the solar system, take away us, take away the universe, take away all the energy, take away every speck of dust, every electron, proton, just nothing. No force, no energy, no intelligence, no matter, nothing. You wouldn't have time because there's nothing to measure anything against, but let's just try to imagine time on top of that. If ever there had been absolutely nothing, what would you have 5 minutes later? Well, that would be nothing. How about 1,000 years later? Nothing. 1 trillion years later? Nothing. You don't have to be a mathematician or a scientist to understand that. Science works on cause and effect. To have an effect, you need a cause. If you got nothing, you don't have a cause. Now, you'll hear scientists try to say, well, you don't need a cause and effect. Well, you kind of do. Let's proceed. Nothing comes from nothing. If there was never nothing, then there was always something. Number 2, life comes from life. And we could say a lot about this. I'm just going to make one point kind of quickly. I've got an old evolutionary book that talks about, we tend to think of life as complicated, but actually the cell is made up of some basic components. You got water, carbon, proteins and stuff. Then it admits proteins are pretty complex, but it lists a few ingredients. Here's the problem with the ingredient approach, okay? You take a squirrel, okay? It's alive, and you have 100% of the ingredients of a squirrel, okay? We're going to put that squirrel in a blender, put it on high, for a couple hours, pour it out for the scientist, and see if he can put together a squirrel. He's got all the ingredients, but he doesn't have a squirrel. This computer right here, all of the ingredients came from planet Earth. There's maybe some copper in here, maybe some aluminum, some brass. All the ingredients came from planet Earth. We didn't import anything from Jupiter. All came from the Earth. But you can't shake up a bucket of mud until it makes a laptop. It's not the list of ingredients, it's the intelligent arrangement of the ingredients. And then, of course, that leads us to this one. Intentional design comes from an intentional designer. So that brings us back to the bird's nest in Job 39. Job 39. Is it at your command that the eagle mounts up and makes his nest on high? You didn't tell the eagle to do that. Job didn't tell the eagle to do that. Who arranged for the eagle to do that? The Creator arranged for the eagle to do that. And let's take a look not just at an eagle's nest, but some other nests. And here's why this is really kind of interesting to me. This is from an atheistic website or an ex-Christian website. And this is a guy asking other unbelievers for help to explain the bird's nest because he's troubled by the bird's nest. Listen to this. He said, many of us know that a lot of things we used to believe were instinct and actually information transfer, bird songs, bird migrations, dam building, et cetera, et cetera. He says, nest building, And then he says, here's a question that stumps me. And if a Christian asks me, I'd love to have an answer. Nest building. How is the information transferred from parent to offspring for nest construction? Think about that for a minute. How does the bird learn to build the nest? He wasn't there. So Austin, you just had a baby boy, you and your wife. You bring him home, you might have put him in a baby bed. He didn't help build the baby bed. He didn't watch whoever built it. And he's probably not laying there today saying, okay, that looks like, that's a Phillips head screw there. When a baby bird is born, he's in a nest. How does he even know somebody built it? And yet that bird is going to be able to build a nest. How do they do that? And he goes on and he talks about, you can see how some things could develop, because some birds just do a nest on the ground or something, or an anthill. You can build a thing. He points out, but a difference between the anthill and a bird's nest is if you don't do a good job, it's like, how does this happen? And he says, just curious what you think. I know as a Christian who accepted the theory of evolution by natural selection in his past, I dreaded some young earther addressing me with this question. And yet they offered it, et cetera, et cetera. And he says, yes, there's plenty of bird nests, all shapes, sizes, including burrows that resemble something like a reptile. He said, but this is a problem for him. He said, this just looks like something that should be the result of an information transfer of some sort. Anyway, grateful for any response. And he's saying, I hope no Christian ever asks me this question until he can get a response. We'll see what he got later. But let's look at some bird nests for a minute. Here's a question that stumps me. And if a Christian asks it, I'd love to have an answer. Nest building is another matter. Birds build and repair nests before the eggs are laid. When the offspring leaves the nest, they don't return to it. In other words, they never observe their parents building nests. It's not like an anthill or a beehive built in modules. You either get it right or you get disaster. All right, so there's bitty tiny nests, there's big nests, there are pendant nests. Take a look at that one. This is a weaver bird that builds a nest like this. And there's a masked weaver building a nest. This is a Baja weaver working on a nest. These are more Baja weavers. How do they know how to do that? And they can get better with practice. But there's a difference between getting better with practice and kind of knowing where to start to begin with. If you and your wife just had a child, before this, you probably picked out a home. If your wife had said, where are we going to live? And you said, well, I've got a piece of grass. I'm going to start hanging it from a tree, and you'll put the baby up there. She probably wouldn't have trusted you on that with good reason. This is another bird here, and check him out. He's on the way to build his nest like that. There are sewn nests by tailor birds that sew nests together with rivets and that type of thing. Here's a tailor bird, and there you see the sewn nest and the rivets and that type of thing. Here's a picture of the rivets, and here's a picture down inside the nest. There are adherent cup nests where with mud, they stick it to the side and put the eggs in there. If you told your wife, well, I'm going to put some mud on the wall and we'll put the baby up there. Again, she might not have gone for that idea. There are nests built out of bird saliva. This is in Southeast Asia, and you can see the ladder there. People will climb up maybe 50, 70, or 100 feet in the air in a cave to go up and get these, and they're very controlled on how many you can harvest and stuff. It's what they make bird nest soup from. If you've ever had real bird nest soup, if you had it made from pasta, it's not that expensive. Real bird nest soup, that's like $888 for a pack of them. And this is what it looks like. And the cave swiftlets produce these with their saliva that hardens. They start putting a little bit on this cave wall, and the cave wall will often slope out like that, and they'll put the cup there. And there's snakes and stuff down below that would love to eat those birds. And they're able to build that nest up there, and it holds the eggs, and it stays there. That's the cave swiftlet that does it. There are elastic nests. So this is a bird, I believe this is over in Britain, and they will build this elastic nest. And they will put lichen and moss and spider webbing in it, which helps it stretch. And so they'll lay a bunch of eggs in there, and then as the babies hatch, they've got room to stretch. Inside it'll be lined with 1,500 to 2,000 feathers. It might have 8 to 15 eggs, and they will fly between 600 and 700 miles to get the different things, including the spider webs, to build that. Now, these birds will do some generational things where they'll kind of help each other out. But how do they know to do that? And then, of course, there's your standard cup nest like a robin might make in your backyard. How does he know to do that? So, can you start to see now why this atheist is wondering, this seems like an awful lot to just be instinct. There ought to be some information transfer, but like with say, a robin, the egg will hatch, little baby robin comes out, and within 2 weeks, he can fly, and then pretty soon he flies away from that nest, never to come back. And yet, what's he gonna do? He's gonna know how to build a nest. By the way, how many of you think you could build a really nice, good nest? Without hands, okay? So, after he asked that, he got an answer. And a fellow said, a new study has found that birds learn the art of nest building rather than being just an instinctive skill. And they quote Richard Dawkins. Well, he says, interesting article. They don't address how they first learned about nest building, though, because it doesn't. The article is from a study over in Edinburgh, Scotland, and they studied weaver birds, and they found that the more nests weaver birds build, over time they get better at it, drop fewer pieces of grass or whatever, and they get better. Okay, that doesn't, practice can make perfect for all sorts of things, but how did they know to do it to begin with? And that's what he's asking. And they give this other article that doesn't address that because it says that can like add to it. And he says, but that doesn't address that. And then the website says, this topic is now closed to further replies. He never got his answer. American robins, they must build up, a baby robin is ready to leave the nest when they're 13 days old, and within 24 hours, the nest will be empty. Then, by the way, I meant to ask before I got up here, because sometimes I have vitamin C with me, but I could either use a bottle of water or a Certs or anything, because when I talk fast sometimes I get a tickle in my throat. So if anybody's got any kind of a lozenge or a bottle of water, that would be great. Hummingbirds. Super, thank you very much. Hummingbirds. These guys are really, really cool. And they make some tiny, tiny little nests. Thank you. Now, this is in 2012. Let me get ahead of this tickle or we're going to have trouble. There's some right there. I meant to ask for that at the beginning. Sorry, I forgot to. This is a nano hummingbird. There was an invention issue with Time Magazine back in 2012, and this made the cover. That's a drone. It could go up to 11 miles per hour. I think I am going to need a little water. Oh, thank you. Saved my life. Thanks. Thank you very much. I knew I was going to be having to talk fast, and I thought, well, I need to get some water, and I forgot. This drone can fly up to 11 miles per hour. It can fly for 5 minutes, and it can hover, maneuver, do a 360. And so let's say you ask your atheist friend, is that a planned combination of parts showing evidence of a designer? Or is that an unplanned combination of parts showing no evidence of a designer? Now think of your atheist and agnostic friends. How many of them would say this? 0. None of your atheist friends would believe that is, oh no, excuse me, this. None of your atheist friends would say it's an unplanned combination of parts showing no evidence of design. Every single of your atheist friends would believe it's a planned combination showing evidence of a designer, right? Amen? So who designed it? They'll say, well, a Homo sapien designed it, right? Then ask, is a Homo sapien a planned combination of parts showing evidence of a designer, or an unplanned combination of parts showing no evidence of a designer? And if he's an atheist, what's he going to say? This. Well, guess what he just did? This is ultimately the product of an unplanned combination of parts with no evidence of a designer that somehow, did this other thing in between. But let's go back to that thing here that they know. No way that could have happened by chance. That happened to be designed. I want to show you something much more sophisticated than that. And it's a real hummingbird. A real hummingbird is so much more sophisticated than the robot hummingbird. For example, he can fly nonstop 500 miles, the ruby-throated hummingbird. We know that because they migrate across the Gulf of Mexico. It can go 30 miles an hour. In escape mode, it can go 50 miles per hour, and the weight is the weight of a penny. And in that weight of a penny is all the design needed for him to fly 500 miles non-stop. And be able to fly in midair, and be able to go in reverse, and know how to build a nest. All inside a penny, and able to reproduce. You know what? That's a pretty cool invention, but I don't think you can buy 2 of them, put them in a cage, and get some more. That's not how that works. It's not that sophisticated. This is Science Daily a few years ago. Is evolution more intelligent than we thought? When we look at the amazing, apparently intelligent designs that evolution produces, it takes some imagination to understand how random variation and selection produced them. If evolution can learn from experience and thus improve on its own ability to evolve over time, this can demystify the awesomeness of the designs that evolution produces. Natural selection can accumulate knowledge that enables it to evolve smarter. That's exciting because it explains why biological design appears to be so intelligent. They're trying, you see? That can help demystify the awesomeness of the design. No excuse. They can see the awesomeness of the design, and they're trying to find some way to explain it away, and so they're thinking maybe evolution, a concept, a process, gets smarter. A few quick non-bird designs. We've got time to get to this. So this is a honeybee, and some of you maybe raise bees, and if you do, you probably know what the waggle dance is. Show of hands, anybody know about the waggle dance? So bee, very good. So a waggle dance is what a bee will do after he's found some nectar. He will go back to the hive and he will show where the nectar is in relationship to the sun and how far away it is. And this is how he does it. He does that little waggle right there. He goes across and then he'll loop around and do it again, and loop around and figure eight, and do it again, and do it again, and the other bees are watching. And then they know where to go. Because his line of waggle is showing where the nectar is in angle to where the sun is. And the length of his waggle tells them if he does a short waggle, it's a short distance. If it's far, and those and European bees understand the waggle dance of North American bees. How big is a bee brain? Not really big. So much design. This is an archer fish. Raise your hand if you know about the archer fish. Oh, very good. Stacy knows about all these. All right, this is an archer fish, and it's down in South America, and it's called archer because if any of you are archers and you do bow hunting, you shoot things down, right? That's what he does. So this is how an archer fish achieve a powerful impact. This is in +1. It's hydrodynamic instability repulsed jet. What he does, he can spit a bead of water way up into the brush near the creek, stream, or river, or whatever, and knock a bug down and then eat it. And it confuses scientists because when he does it, it produces a bigger impact as it goes farther. And so they've been studying it, trying to figure out, the mechanisms of that, and you'll see some of their diagrams of it in a minute. But it's not a big fish, but this is an archer fish, and this is in a lab, and they have taped a bug or an image of a bug or something up there so that you're not going to get to see the bug fall because he's taped. But the archer fish sees it. And by the way, something else that scientists have noticed, have you ever noticed that when you look in an aquarium, there's the light refraction? So like, here's an aquarium, there's a goldfish, right? If you're standing here, there's the goldfish. If you're looking from here, there's the goldfish. If you stand at the angle, the goldfish seems to be in different places, right? His eyes are down below level, and yet he's able to hit the bug. I don't mean that every archer fish hits him every time, but a bug's clinging ability is really strong compared to their body weight. How many times have you gotten in your car and there's a grasshopper or some bug on your windshield, and you start driving down the road, and he's holding on to the glass? And you get to 30 miles an hour, and he's holding on. You get to 40 miles an hour, and he's holding on. He's got to be able to hit it enough to knock him loose from that. Now watch closely, and you'll see him do it. Bam! And that's slow motion. I'm going to do it again for you. Well, no, we'll do it again in a second. But the way it produces it, the water drop condenses into a wider thing to have more of an impact farther up where it's actually going to hit the bug. I'm going to let you see it again. Bam! How do you think that happened? Do you think there were just some fish in the river? One says, I'm hungry too. Let's find a worm. I don't see any worms today. Check that out. Look at that beetle, if you beat up there. Yeah, but I got an idea. I don't think that's how it happened. I don't think a robin's going, I wish I had a place to stop and lay an egg. I don't know what to do. Hey, I got an idea. I'm just remembering when I was born, there was so, how do these animals know to do this? One more time. Bam! Question. How would that gradually evolve? Because that's how we're told a lot of things. Well, it happened little bit by little bit by little bit. Okay, so you're an archer fish, I'm an archer fish. I got an idea. And there's a little bubble of water and the beetle doesn't notice. Ooh, let's try that again. Or, hey, I think I moistened him. In other words, this is not effective until it's effective. How does that fish know to do that? What survival advantage would step one produce? And then take a look at your fingerprint. Why do you have fingerprints? Just think about it for a minute. You were born with them. Austin, at the hospital, they took your little baby and they put some ink on the foot and put it on to identify that baby. And some of you are thinking, that's why we have fingerprints, for identification. The Chinese noticed that fingerprints were unique and they used them in some seals or something way back hundreds of years ago. But the first court case where fingerprint identification was used was a little over 100 years ago. So I don't think that's the main reason God gave us fingerprints. All your ancestors back to Adam had fingerprints. And very few of them, unless you had some recent criminals in your family, had their fingerprints checked very often. Why do you have fingerprints? Why do you have tread on your shoe? It's for grip. That's what it is. You use it all the time. If you pick up a dime, if you open a jar of pickles, if you're using a hammer, if you're swinging a bat, you use your fingerprints constantly. If you want to see the difference, I do an experiment with kids sometimes. I'll get a tapered glass, tapered this way. I'll put it in a plastic bowl, and I'll get the glass wet. I'll tell the kids, try to pick it up with the back of your fingers. It just slides right off. And I say, try it with your fingers. It goes right up, because you got that tread. If you want to do this, you can do this. Put your skin together on your wrists and press, and you can rub, and now put your hands together right there. Totally different. It's for grip. Now, I bought a tire today because I had a defective tire. Guess where they put the tread? On the part that contacts the road, not up here. On my athletic shoes, where'd they put the tread? Right where I need it. Where did God put your tread? Right here and right here. Otherwise, a lot of you would have fallen down in the shower this week. You've used it all your life. And a number of you never even noticed what it was. And that's maybe the simplest design in the body, just about. There's much more amazing things inside. Incredible things going on inside. Phenomenal. But I see an advantage in starting just with the simple outside things, because your friends have fingerprints and they can look at that and think, oh yeah. And your friend didn't think of having it. He didn't think, boy, I could use some grip, and started carving it out. Our Creator put those things there for us. Here's a fun homework assignment. I'm not going to show them to you, but if you got kids, show them the mimic octopus. Sometime this week, just Google mimic octopus and watch that thing. It's really amazing. I want to finish with this illustration. Suppose we're walking through a meadow, no road anywhere nearby, no people, and we come to a bunch of rocks, okay? I would not think that's a natural formation. I would think there's enough design in that somebody set that up. Would you agree? I mean, if there was some different rock formation, I think it might have just happened. But I would say, no, I think some people brought these rocks here and set that up. And if we're walking along and we've been hiking through nature and we come to that formation rocks, and then all of a sudden in the middle of it, we see that. And one of you says, where'd that come from? And nobody's there. There's no road there. It's just out there. And you say, where'd that come from? And I say, I think it just happened. What would you say? What do you mean it just happened? I said, well, It's made of steel. Steel comes from iron. There's iron ore in the earth. I'll tell you what I think happened. I think that there was iron ore in the earth, and from tectonic pressure it was pushed until it came to the surface. And then I think there was either lightning or something that heated that and forged it into steel. And then I think over millions of years, I think wind, shaped it into an aerodynamic shape. And I think that there used to be a tropical zone here, and there were some rubber trees, and there was one here, 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 and here. And I think a forest fire or some climate change vulcanized it into rubber, and then a tornado inflated each one of them to 44 psi. And then during the Ice Age, I think some animals hibernated inside it because you can see their skins. And you would say, I don't think so. I'd say, well, what do you think happened? You say, I think some Porsche engineers designed it. And I say, have you ever seen a Porsche engineer? And you say, well, no. Then why do you believe in them? Because you've seen the Porsche. I've never seen a Porsche engineer, but by seeing a Porsche, I can tell that Porsche engineers exist. Which is more sophisticated, your body or that vehicle? It's got a chassis, do you? Yeah, you got a skeleton. It's got lights, you've got eyes. It's got some computer systems, you've got something a lot better. It takes in air and filters it. You take in air and filters it. It burns fuel. You burn fuel. But if it gets scratched, it can't heal itself. And it can't reproduce. You can't buy a couple of Porsches, put them in your garage, and get a little Volkswagen. That's not how that works. You're far more sophisticated. Somebody says, no, this is more sophisticated because it can go faster. It can go faster on a paved road. But it gets to a stone wall, it can't climb it. It gets to a creek, it can't swim it. And the last point, a human has the capability to design and create that to go quicker on an asphalt road. That doesn't have the capability to produce a human. You're far more sophisticated than that. Nothing comes from nothing. Tell your friends that. Help them to realize that. Help them realize, you're right. Nothing comes from nothing. Life comes from life. Intentional design comes from an intentional designer. Since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature is clearly seen being understood through what it is made. So we're without excuse. But Romans 1, what did the Gentiles do? Sinned. What did the Jews do? Sinned. What does Romans 3 say? All of us have sinned and fallen short of God. Yet God sent his Son, who shed his blood and calls us to put our faith and our trust in him. And in Romans 6, it describes what those Christians had done. They had crucified their old man, buried their old man in baptism, buried into Christ, into his death, and then raised to walk in newness of life. And if you need to do that this evening, won't you do so as we stand and sing?
When we walk with the Lord in the light of his word, what a glory he sheds on our way. While we do his good will, he abides with us still, and with all who will trust and obey. Trust and obey, for
Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.